So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the topic today. And, the topic is all about building a 2023 go-to-market plan for your business. And before we do a deep dive on that, I always like to just take a step back because I know there's folks of all different skill levels here. Maybe this is your first time in a marketing leadership position. Maybe you're not even in a marketing leadership position yet, but you want to know how to do these things. So I just wanted to take a step back and talk about what are the critical ingredients in building a go-to-market strategy for your business or a plan for your business, and then really just kind of what is marketing's job in a company, because those things are really kind of important when we think about building out our go-to-market strategy. So the first thing that I wanted to do is just cover, what are the four ingredients, right here. There's really four things that you need in order to have a successful marketing plan for your business. And it starts with understanding what are the key objectives. Where's the company trying to grow, right? And normally for us as marketing leaders, we're not the ones that decide that, right? We go to leadership and leadership's going to tell us, or maybe we are negotiating that with them, but they tell us where the business is trying to grow. And then our business as marketers is really to come in and figure out how marketing is going to help us accomplish that objective. And so step one is if your leadership hasn't told you, hey, we're trying to take this hill, or these are the things we're trying to accomplish, it will be really hard for you to build out a go-to-market strategy that's going to produce the results that you're looking for. But once you have that, the next ingredient is really your strategic plan. And so to use an analogy, if the objective is, hey, we need to go tackle this hill, that's our objective. That's what the CEO tells you. Well, the thing we need to figure out is, well, how are we going to tackle that hill? Are we going to climb it? Are we going to get in a car and drive up the road to get to the top? Are we going to rent a helicopter and fly to the top and then drop down? That's our strategy, right? That's what we do as marketing leaders, is go figure out, okay, the boss says we're going to take the hill. What's the best way for us to take the hill? And that's for us to really define. So how are we going to get there? And then from there, we can go figure out the tactics. And so the tactics, as you might imagine, are going to be a lot different based on your strategy. So if I'm going to try to helicopter over to the hill and then drop down, I'm going to need different things to take with me, if you will, versus me trying to climb up to the top of the hill. And so one thing I see marketing folks really struggle with sometimes is they want to start with tactics because they're getting lots of calls from marketing tech vendors, or they're hearing about all these great little shiny trinkets and places that they need to be focusing their time, energy, and money on. But those aren't going to really help you unless you've connected the dots between where's the company trying to grow, what is my plan to get there? Then you bring in the tactics that are going to really be the things you want to execute on to help you accomplish that goal. And then the last critical ingredient are, what are those pass-fail key performance indicators that are going to show you that you're heading in the right direction. And a couple of things about key performance indicators, and we'll talk more about these later, is, one, they need to tell you that you're heading in the right direction. So you need to be able to have guardrails or measuring sticks that show you that you're heading in the right direction. Then you also need to have those measuring sticks that you're going to use to report up to management, to let them know, hey, this is where we're going, and these are the adjustments we're making based on what the data is telling us. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how to come up with those today as we go through the materials. So those are the four ingredients. So when you think about, okay, I've got to build a go-to-market strategy for my business, it's going to start with those objectives, then the strategy, then the tactics, and then how are you going to measure success? So the next bullet down there, or major sub-bullet, if you will, under general is, really what is marketing at 50,000 feet? And I don't certainly mean to insult anybody that's here today, but I think it's always good to kind of level set on this because as we work with at Vindy, marketing leaders within our clients and with companies that we talk to throughout the year, I know that getting clarity around these will help you as you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy for next year. So the things that we need to own as marketers, start with understanding the customer. And, I can't tell you how often I talk to businesses and, we laugh about it at Vindy sometimes because it feels like, anybody that can fog a mirror or write a check is a customer. And the reality is, if that's what you're hearing from leadership, then there's no way you're going to be you're going to be able to market to those folks. Because if you're trying to market to everybody, you know, the old adage, marketing to everybody is actually marketing to nobody. And so as marketers, we've got to own who our very best customer is. And, you know, which ties right into the next bullet there, you know, some real clarity on what is the problem that we actually solve at the highest possible level. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I really know the problem that we solve. But I'm telling you, you know, we sit in on lots of client meetings throughout the year, and we ask leadership, we ask marketing people, hey, what problem do you solve? And, you know, if there's 5 people in the room, we're going to get 5 different answers, and sometimes arguments and fistfights will break out, right? Because not everybody's on the same page. But as marketers, we really have to own that. We have to own who is our ideal customer. And then once we get that, what is the real problem at a 50,000 foot level that we really solve for those customers? And then the next bullet down is, now that we understand those things, we have to have a plan on how are we going to capture their attention. And then how are we going to hold their attention? So how are we going to get our message in front of them? And then how are we going to keep that message in front of them so that when they have the problem that we can solve, that they think of us first? And that's really critical. So it's not just, hey, we solved this problem. They see it one time and then they forget about us. You know, marketing is an exercise in memorization. We say that at Vendy all the time. So we've got to stay in front of them and hold their attention so that when they do have that problem, they think, okay, I'm going to call this company because they can solve this problem for me. And then the last bullet here is, how can you make it easier for them to learn more and purchase? And ultimately, you know, the goal of marketing should be to make selling easier. So we have to understand our customer and the problem that we solve, and we've got to stay in front of them for a long time. But ultimately, all of that's going to fall apart if we haven't figured out a way to make buying from you for your customer super easy. And so that's really ultimately what we need to do. So as we're baking in our plan for 2023, let's make sure that we've got those 4 critical ingredients and make sure that we're really functioning well as a marketing department by understanding our customer and how we're going to hold their attention and make it easy for them to buy from us. Okay, so the next step here is to get into our framework and really talk through building a strategy for each of these pillars of our framework. But I think I'm going to pause here, Andrea, and just see if anybody has any questions. And let's just cover those as we talk about kind of marketing and marketing planning at 50,000 feet. Any questions, Andrea?
Well, one question we get a lot is, you know, how do you sell your plan to your leadership or negotiate a plan that makes sense versus dealing with unrealistic expectations?
Oh, that's a good one, Andrea. So, you know, part of our job as marketers is to build a plan, right? And then the other part is to go sell the plan. And oftentimes, leadership's expectations on what they need from us and what we can really deliver can be different things, right? Especially where we find ourselves today in this world of marketing, where dependence on MQLs is becoming less and less. As you know, we're trying to create more of a frictionless buying experience, and we don't want to force people to opt into gated things if we don't need to, which means our dependence on MQLs are kind of going away, and we've got to trust more that we can generate leads through demand generation. That becomes hard to sell to management because they love to see, you know, marketing come and say, we're going to generate, hey, we generated 1,000 leads last year, we're going to do 5,000 leads this year. And or maybe even the other way around, management is saying, I need you to generate 5,000 leads this year. So those are challenging things. And what I always recommend, and I've got a slide on this, we'll cover it in a little bit, is to really understand your metrics from the previous year. So look back on 2022 and understand, what did it cost you to generate a lead? What did it cost to generate an opportunity? What did it cost to generate a close? And then when your boss comes and says, you know, hey, I need you to bring in, you know, 25% more leads, I think you can go back and say, well, based on our cost per lead, we're going to need this much budget to accomplish that. And so that's a healthy conversation to have to help manage those expectations. So great question, Andrea. Anything else?
No additional questions at this time.
Okay, well, let me jump back to I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll get back into what we were looking at. And so we just kind of covered marketing at a 50,000-foot view. And what I'm going to do now, and you can follow along as I'm sharing my screen, or I drop that link to the agenda for you, is to take a look at our demand generation framework. A key thing to having a good strategy for your business is to have a framework. So this is ours. You don't have to use ours, but what I found is that when you have a framework, really the ability to grow in our marketing and the ability to do better in 2023 than we did in 2022 is to look at these pillars and figure out how can we, how can we really put the pedal to the metal or do things differently in 2023 or improve on things within these pillars to get a better outcome. I think it was Einstein that said, if we try to do the same things year over year and expect a different result, that's basically the definition of insanity. And so what we've got to do if we want a different result is try to do things differently. But that doesn't mean throw the framework out, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but rather really try to hone in on the areas that we can improve. And so I just want to walk through this, and then I'm going to give you some questions to think about as you're building out your strategy. So our framework has 4 pillars in it. It starts with planning. We just need to have a good plan on who we're trying to reach and what are the messages that matter to them. And then from there, we want to activate our audience. And that just simply means understanding the places where our ideal customers hang out to go and learn how to overcome problems and challenges and how to stay connected with their peers and where they're receptive to learn or to hear from us. And we want to be there too. And we want to deliver our messages there too. And that's what we mean by activate our audience. But oftentimes the places that we activate our audience is not on our website or on properties that we even own or control. And so a key part of activate our audience is to drive people from those platforms, those channels where they're hanging out and learning, over to our website where we can establish authority and empathy, which is that third pillar. So our goal ultimately in activate the audience is to get them over to our website where they can learn more about our business and we can really show them that we are super qualified to solve their problem. And not only that, but we have empathy. We want to solve their problem and that we're giving them a plan forward on how to solve their problem. And the best place to do that is on our website. And then the fourth pillar is nurturing relationships. We're all B2B companies here. And so most of us, over 90% of us, I'm sure, we're not selling something today. People are going to go through a long sales process and sales by committee. And so we have to have strategies to stay top of mind in front of our customers while they're going through that process. And so if we want to build out a solid strategy in 2023, then we're going to have to think about how do we do a better job in each one of these pillars. And with that said, I'm just going to walk us through some questions to think about. And I'll open it up for questions when we get to the end of this as well. But let's just take each pillar one at a time. So from a planning perspective, as you're thinking about your plan for next year, make sure that you've got measurable pass-fail key performance indicators. We've already talked about that as a critical ingredient. Make sure that you've nailed down your ideal customer profile. I knew that we were going to be having this session today, so I actually did a post on LinkedIn this morning with a video. It's about a 5-minute video on how to nail down your ideal customer profile, and I've linked it right here in the resource. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but really important that you have a plan for figuring out who your ideal customer is. In fact, I did a poll, I guess it was a week or so ago, where I asked folks, what are your biggest challenges rolling into your strategic planning for 2023. And by far, the number one was getting better at segmenting and honing in on my ideal customer. So watch that video, but really think about, who is your ideal customer and what are the segments and what are the messages that really matter to get their attention? Because without that, your message is going to just be too watered down. The next bullet down is all about messaging, right? So how do we really position ourselves to that ideal customer in a way that helps them understand that we are super qualified, probably the most qualified to solve their problem? And if you feel like you've got a positioning challenge, one of my favorite books right now is obviously Awesome. I've got a link to where you can buy it on Amazon. I have no affiliation with April Dunford, but I've seen her speak a few times and I've read her book. I love it. It's a quick, easy read, but it will really help you, especially if you're a B2B company, which I know all of us are, to think through your positioning. So check that out if that's an area that you really want to focus on in 2023. And then the last question for planning is your content strategy aligned with your ideal customer profile? So is it meeting specifically the needs and problems that they have, but also connecting the dots between your superpower or the things that make you unique in the marketplace? And so those are key things to think about as you're thinking about your strategy for next year, and specifically thinking about planning. Think through those questions, because there might be an area that you can focus on next year. Okay, so the next pillar after planning is activate your audience, which are those watering holes where our customers are going and hanging out. We want to be there too. And so some things you might be thinking about and building out your strategy next year would be, how are you going to get your content in front of them? So what is your paid strategy? And what is your social strategy or organic strategy? And we'll talk more about some ideas behind that here in a little bit, but we need to think about, now that we know who our customer is and the watering holes that they like to hang out, how are we going to get our information in front of them? What are we going to do organically? And then what are we going to do from a paid perspective to ensure that these ideal customers are seeing our message? Because if they don't see it, we can have the best messaging in the world. It's not going to do us any good. The next bullet down is, what is our targeting strategy? So, how are we going to get in front of them? We've got our ideal customer profile identified, but what is the method by which we're going to ensure that message gets there? So are we going to go to LinkedIn and buy what we call buy an audience, where we're selecting, these are the people at these types of industries and these geographies that we're trying to reach? Are we going to leverage engagement? Maybe we're buying intent data. Maybe we've got an ABM strategy. All of those things need to be considered. And it's not going to, in most cases, be one or the other. Oftentimes you're blending multiple things together, but you need to be thinking about, again, tactically, how are we going to get our message in front of them, and how are we going to target them? Rolling down here to the next bullet, what are one or two channels you really want to dominate next year? This is a big challenge I see B2B companies struggle with often, is they want to take on the whole world all at once. And what I think works better is pick one or two channels in this activate your audience stage. Remember, these are those watering holes that you really want to dominate. So try to figure out, where are the lower hanging fruit channels where if I spend a lot of time and energy and effort and potentially money, I've got the biggest opportunity to make a big impact for my business. And let me really get great there. And not try to do everything. Don't have a TikTok strategy maybe this year, or just pick one or two that you think are really great. Maybe it's LinkedIn. Maybe it's LinkedIn plus search. Those are things you need to think about as it relates to your ideal customer profile. But then the next bullet down, pick one new channel to explore. So maybe it is TikTok. I mean, there's a lot of hype around TikTok today. I'm not ready to go double down on it, but maybe you are. I think for me, I'd rather go double down on YouTube. I've been putting a lot of content out on YouTube for the last couple of years, but I haven't really focused on it. Like, how can I get the most out of YouTube? How can I turn that into one of my dominant channels? And so the idea is pick one or two that you really want to dominate this year, and then start testing another one that maybe next year becomes one of your dominant channels. Okay, next bullet down. What is your influencer strategy? In today's world, we have such a great opportunity to get in front of our buyers through avenues of people that already have their ear. And so that might be influencers in your industry. It could be your employees. It could be folks that have a podcast that maybe you can guest on. Certainly maximizing review sites or getting your customers to tell your story. We need to have an influencer strategy, because people really prefer, they're happy to hear our story and have us talk about how great we are. But the reality is they want to hear it from somebody else too. And certainly we want to tap into other folks' audiences when we have an opportunity to do that. So how can we leverage influencers to really get our message out there? And then the last bullet is, how are we going to leverage our sales team to really engage with our leads? This is a huge opportunity that I see a lot of B2B companies struggling with. And that is, you're turning into this lead factory and you're generating lots of opportunity, and sales reps only want to work on, the deals that are ready to pop right now. And we all get that, but they still can have a role to play in helping you stay connected with future buyers and kind of keep you top of mind. So we need to think about, how do we accomplish that? How do we train our sales reps so that they're not, that they're not wasting a lot of their time, but at the same time, we're leveraging what they're doing online as a way to stay top of mind with these customers. And so you just need to think about, how are we going to help keep sales informed this year, and how are we going to how can we leverage them to help us stay top of mind and engage with these prospects in this activate your audience phase. I've got some good resources here for you that you can check out after today, but a blog and some webinar replays, and even a little cheat sheet that you can follow along. I'm not going to go through those, but be sure to check those out afterwards. Okay, so the next pillar, as we're thinking about our strategy, now that we've activated our audience, we have to get folks to our website. And when they're there, we've got to establish authority, and we've got to establish trust and empathy to really validate to them and that buying committee that we are qualified to solve their problem, and we want to solve their problem, and we've given them a good path forward. And so some things to think about is, honestly, go look at your website and just ask yourself the question, is your website a buyer resource? Like, if you tried to do business with you as a buyer, would it be an easy or difficult thing to do? Are you providing a nice, easy path for them to get their problem solved and to overcome their challenge? That's something you need to look at. And if you feel like it's a little rough around the edges, then maybe that's a focus area for you in 2023. Specifically, next bullet down, look at your homepage, look at your landing pages. I look at a lot of home pages. I look at a lot of landing pages, and I would say maybe 10% of the time, I feel like they've got all the right ingredients that are going to make it easy for that buyer to make the decision to move forward. And so just go look at them and ask yourself the question, if I were a buyer and I saw this homepage, or I landed on this, request a consultation or schedule a demo, are we giving them the information in the right way to make them go, yeah, you know what, I am going to fill that information out. You realize when your demo page or your conversion page or landing page, whatever you want to call it, that's the first place in the buying journey that the buyer's actually putting skin in the game, right? So they're actually giving us their information in exchange for whatever it is that we're offering. And that's a risky situation. And so we've got to make that, what we call at Vindy, fair exchange of value. So, or even, amazing exchange of value, if you will, so that when they do fill out that form, they feel really confident it's going to help them in their journey. So just go take a look at your landing pages and see if that's an area that you need to work on this year. Next bullet down, do you have a content marketing flywheel? And so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about that, but you've probably heard that term. We need to be content factories in today's world. Even, some of the big pundits in B2B marketing are saying we all need to be media companies. Well, that's a lot of content. And so what we found is building a flywheel where, one type of content can spawn other types of content is a way to accomplish that. And I'll give you an example for us. These Demand Gen Jam sessions, this session that you're watching right now is a big part of our flywheel. So, we do these sessions each month. I love connecting with you guys like this. I love talking about these various topics. But as soon as this is over, this gets cut into multiple videos. The transcript, we create a transcript of it. It goes to one of our copywriters. They write a blog. Sometimes multiple blogs. So it's part of our flywheel strategy. And if you don't have a flywheel strategy, that may be something you need to think about in 2023. Next bullet down, is your content strategy building SEO equity, connecting the dots, solving problems, and pointing to your USP? I think we've kind of talked about that, but those are also important factors in establishing authority. And then how are you going to remove friction from the buyer journey? So it's not just the messaging, but is the path making sense? Are we asking for things that we shouldn't be asking for? Are we gating things that we don't need to gate? Does our navigation look like a Chinese menu? Or is our navigation simple and easy to follow? Those are things that we really need to be thinking about for building our strategy in 2023 as it relates to establishing authority. And I've got a resource here for you. It's our UX checklist. I've talked about that a few times in the past, but be sure to check that out if you need help with establishing authority and fixing your UX. Okay, last pillar, and then we're going to jump into a template that I've built for you. And that's the nurture relationship pillar, probably one of the most important pillars for us to think about, because, they're not going to come and buy today. They're going to come and buy in the future. And so what do we do to stay top of mind with them? And so you might be thinking about, what are some things that we can do? Are you happy with your conversion rates? Are you happy with your cost per lead? Are there things that we can do to really drive our cost per lead down or our conversion rates up? What can you do to really dominate the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel? The middle of the funnel is still very important for us as B2B companies, but as less and less people are interested in filling out forms to get ebooks and things like that, we're going to have to come up with a strategy to still win in that middle of the funnel. And so maybe that's a focus for you in 2023, is reimagining the middle of the funnel and how we're going to really stay relevant and important and stay connected to buyers in the middle of the funnel, even if we're not so dependent on MQLs moving forward. Next bullet down. What can marketing do to make it easier for sales to win more business in 2023? So this is all about working with your sales reps and making sure that you've provided them the resources, or maybe connecting with customers in a way that they don't have to do all the touches and they only do the important touches, but just working out a good strategy for engaging with sales in 2023. Next bullet down, what's your plan for gating or ungating? I'm not saying we have to ungate everything, but I am telling you that you probably need to think about your gating strategy. And if all you're doing is gating something to get somebody's information so that you can drip market to them, that's probably not the right type of information to gate. We quit gating things at Vendy for our own business about a year ago. And what we did to solve for that was actually this Demand Gen Jam session is an example of that. So, we have people register for a Zoom, and that gives you access to this meeting. And that's one of our ways that we're gating content, where there's a purpose behind the information, if that makes sense. So, an ebook, giving somebody your email address, there's really not a purpose behind that other than the business wants your email address. So just think about your gating strategy for next year. And then the last bullet down here, how should you leverage email marketing and drip marketing in 2023? Some people are saying email marketing is dead, and I don't believe that at all. I think we still very much need to own a list of potential customers that we can market to on a regular basis. We can't put all of our eggs in the social media basket or all of our eggs in the SEO basket. We have to build a list of prospects and we have to market to them. But we just have to do it in a smart way. And so we just need to think about how can we turn our email marketing into actually a resource for buyers so that when they get our email, they don't feel like it's a spammy thing, but they feel like it's a useful thing that's going to help them in their journey. And so what I wanted to do, and obviously I'm giving you this agenda so that you can go back and think about these things. And certainly we're recording this, you can rewatch it, but just some things to think about as you're trying to go back to even what we started with at the beginning of the session about the 4 ingredients that you need to build out your strategy. So what I want to do next is actually go into this template, and I'll spend a little bit of time just walking you through these slides and why we built the template. But I'm going to pause and just ask Andrea here if there's any questions or anything she wants to ask as it relates to, the having a framework to think through your strategy. Then these questions that I kind of posed for you to think about. Did anything pop up, Andrea, or anything you want to ask?
Yeah, we do a few questions, Paul. One is, what would be some KPIs that are important for demand generation specifically?
Great question. I've got a slide I'm going to show here in a little bit that will walk you through that, but let me cover a couple of things at a high level. So when you really start focusing on demand generation, the dependence on the marketing qualified lead goes down. And so you have to be okay with the fact that you might generate fewer MQLs in 2023 if you're really going to go after demand generation, but you're going to actually generate more opportunities and more pipeline. And so And you're also going to invest, if you do it the right way, you're going to be investing in tactics that aren't necessarily direct response. For example, one of the things that we recommend to our clients is that they understand, what are those key messages that they needed to get in front of buyers, and to package up social content that answers those questions, and then to pay to actually get that information in front of them through like paid social. Well, without any direct response component to it. And so that scares a lot of people, right? Oh my gosh, you want me to spend thousands of dollars to get my message in front of a buyer, but they can't fill out a gated ebook, or they can't become a lead? And the answer is yeah, because what the goal is content consumption more than lead generation. The reason I tell you that is that, and it ties back to this KPI question, you have to start looking at blended results. And so you want to look at what is your total cost per lead, what is your total conversion rate, what is your MQL to SQL conversion rate, what does your pipeline growth look like over time? Because what'll happen is you'll spend more money in the top of the funnel, but that's going to result in, believe it or not, lower cost per acquisition in the long run. And so I've got a slide, I'll cover that a little bit more detail, but great question.
One more, Paul, is just if we have any other examples for where to gate content.
Yeah, the easiest one is events, and that's why we do events every single month. So that's a great way to gate content. Other ones might be tools or calculators or things or assessments where they have to fill out a form you're going to do, or some type of, they're giving you their data because you need that data in order to do this assessment. And then you have to deliver the assessment to them either via email or with a person that can go over it with them. That's another, logical reason to gate, because you need the information in order to do the work that you've promised them. And then I haven't talked about it much on this session, but community in my mind is where this is all going, right? So in the future, we won't gate things, but we'll say, join our community. Hey, you want to watch these replays of webinars? Join our community. You want all of our ebooks, all of our research, all of our findings? You don't have to opt in for those things. Just join our community. Once you join our community, they're all available to you. So that's, and you get all these other benefits by being a part of our community. So I think that's where the MQL is going, and us as B2B marketers need to respond to that. Are we good, Andrea?
Yeah, good, Paul.
Okay, awesome. Well, let me share my screen again. And I'm going to show you what I've got here. And I've got this set up as a template. And so you guys can actually go in and use this on your own. I believe there's going to be slides in here that you're going to want to use or possibly use. And so that's why I'm giving it to you as not a PDF, but actually as a Google Slides document. And I'm just letting you know, I'm giving everybody here permission to use all these slides however you want. So don't feel like you've got to get my permission or that you're doing anything wrong. If you want to lift any of this content and put it into your own marketing strategy for next year, you certainly have our permission to do that. And we would love for you to do that. So feel free to borrow this and do what you will with it. But I'm going to go ahead and pull it up, and we're just going to walk through this. And some of it's going to be template stuff, and some of it will be educational. And so, the idea is we need to define those corporate goals. Typically, they're around revenue growth or logo acquisition or new product launches or other things. This usually comes from the leadership. They're going to tell you what those goals are, and you need to document them. And so I'm not, just kind of think through that, talk to your senior leadership, find out what they're wanting to do. And then once you figure out what those big objectives are, and typically it's like 1 to 3 things, man, if your senior leadership gives you 10 things, you might wonder about that. So it's usually 2 or 3 things, right? 1 to 3 things. But once you figure that out, what you want to do is kind of work backwards as you're building out your strategy from the right to the left. So on that far right, you kind of think through, and this is where you want to, get your marketing team together, or maybe get the leadership team together, however you want to get to the answers to these questions. But you start with the key objective, which might be more sales revenue. You can see that on the right. This is just an example. then the next thing you want to do is ask yourself the question, or the team, whoever you've gotten together there, what are the drivers of that outcome? So, the boss is asking for this outcome. What are the things that marketing can do that drive that outcome? And so in this example, obviously more opportunities might be a driver of that outcome. Better sales follow-up of the leads that we already have, that might be a driver of that desired outcome. So once you've identified the drivers, then you want to continue to work backwards and start thinking about what are the things that influence those drivers. And so if a driver is, I want more opportunities, then an influencer of that might be, well, gosh, if we need more opportunities, we need more qualified leads. So that's an example of an influencer. And just follow that along. So what would influence qualified leads? Well, more traffic or more ways for a prospect to engage. That might influence more leads. And then ultimately on the far left there, you see, well, what would influence more traffic? Well, better quality content, better ads. This isn't necessarily your recipe. I'm just trying to give you an example so you can think about, okay, the boss just gave me this driver or this objective. How can I really back into the things we need to, what tools do we need to take with us? And, are we, getting in a helicopter, or are we climbing the mountain to get to the top? Well, you also need to go back and do an assessment and just ask yourself, hey, in 2022, what worked really, really well? What didn't work well? Are there reasons why the things that we hoped would work didn't work? Are there things we can do better this year? And really understand those baseline metrics. We were just talking about KPIs. And then, what other things do we want to look at or investigate to help us really paint a picture of where we are? I'm a big fan of doing SWOTs. Most of us did SWOTs in college. I don't know if you do them often for your business. Those that are on the call with Vindy today know that I love SWOTs. And so SWOTs are great. You kind of look at, what are the internal strengths that you have and what are the internal weaknesses you need to overcome, but then what are the external things, your opportunities and your threats. It doesn't take long to kind of work through that, but that'll help you assess kind of your situation to help you better prepare your go-to-market strategy. And then from there, you can define your marketing goals. And really, these marketing goals are designed to answer the question, how will digital marketing support our corporate goals? Our company said this is where we're trying to grow. And these are the marketing activities or goals that we're going to achieve that are going to help us accomplish that. What are the measurable outcomes, right? So let's get on the same page with the things that we want to measure. And, let me just say right now, just because something can be measured doesn't mean that it should be measured. And just because it can be measured doesn't mean it needs to be reported to leadership. Some things you want to use to report to leadership, some things you want to use just to make better bets. And so it's important that you understand the difference between the two. And this ties right into that question about KPIs. And this is a document that I use internally to manage the Vindy go-to-market strategy. And so you can see I've got just working from left to right. I'm not going to go through this in huge detail, but I've got all the different campaigns or channels that we focus on, what we spend in those, what kind of outcomes that we get. But then you'll notice where I've got these blue call outs. These are the things that I focus on from a KPI perspective. I want to see our cost per opportunity improve. I want to see our cost per acquisition improve. I want to see our closing rates improve. And I don't know if you guys can see it because I've got all of your headshots on the far right, but in the slide, you'll notice that we even look at, return on investment and things like that. So, it's not that I'm going to hold LinkedIn accountable, because I know that a lot of what we spend on LinkedIn is top of the funnel stuff for hitting a cost per lead metric. But what I am looking for is that my entire demand gen go-to-market function is improving over time. And so it's those blended KPIs that make so much that are so important to pay attention to and really get everybody on board with. Because if you're not focusing on blended KPIs and improvements over time, you might have a very important channel that's actually really driving great awareness and trust, but that's not how people are converting. So ultimately what they do is they're like, oh my gosh, I love these demand gen jam sessions that Paul does. But when they become a lead, they just Google Vendy Digital and then fill out a form. Well, you're going to think that Vendy Digital or Google search is what caused that lead to happen, when the reality is it was the Demand Gen Jam session that caused it to happen. And so that's why blended metrics are so much more important. The other thing you need to think about when you're building out your strategy is also just look at the calendar. Are there product launches? Are there events you need to be aware of? Big announcements that are happening? Maybe you're getting acquired or planning to acquire companies. Those things all need to get factored into your strategy, or are going to have an impact on the tactics that you bring to the table. One just quick note there. I have the opportunity to work with lots of companies on their planning. And, I feel like, especially a lot of not SaaS companies, but just traditional B2B companies that have, sales forces, they are very event centric and almost use events to drive everything else. And I would say events are important, but I don't think events should be, the starting place for building out your go-to-market strategy. It's just a different function of how you're going to get in front of buyers. And then how can you leverage it? One thing that I'm seeing a lot of smart companies doing now with events is they're not actually exhibiting at the event anymore. They're still attending the event. They're taking those dollars and using them for other things, but they're going with camera crews and they're actually interviewing customers and getting a lot of great video content that they can use in their content marketing flywheel. So just how are you going to leverage events, and what events are you going to be a part of? Okay, so this next section here is just thinking about, once you've drilled down on your ICP, I think it's really important that you pick 4 or 5 things that are critical for them to know about your business. What are those things that you absolutely want them to know about your business, and document those at very high level here, right? And then once you figure that out, because that's going to feed your top of the funnel strategy, is making sure that those messages are out there in the market. But the next thing we want to do is think about, well, now that they know these things, what do we want them to do? And let's define those things. Like, okay, part of our goal is to get in front of people that don't know we exist and help them understand the problem we solve. That's what we want them to know. Now that they know that, what do we want them to do? And it's not always talk to a sales rep, right? It could be, hey, I want them to join our community. I want them to come to a Demand Gen Jam session. I want them to read this content on our website. I want them to check out these resources. I mean, think about all the resources that I've shared in this document already. There's a reason for that, right? I want people that know that we exist and the problem that we solve to see all these great tools that can help them. And some of those people that are exposed to those resources are ultimately going to ask us to help them. And so how can you accomplish that same thing by identifying the things you want them to do in your business? And then this is just kind of a laundry list of things to think about. As you're thinking about your business, it's similar to going through the 4 pillars that we went through on the agenda. But, these are some specific areas that oftentimes businesses just need to improve on, from messaging to website UX to, making sure that you've got a media plan that makes sense. In that media plan bullet, you see that I've got always on versus lead gen. I've actually got a slide for that. I'll show you in a minute what that's all about. But this is just a laundry list of things to think about. Next month, we're going to cover what are big trends that we're seeing in 2023. And I'll cover some of these, like CEO advocacy, employee advocacy, easy for me to say, community, things like that are some really cool things I think we need to be thinking about. But in general, just think about this laundry list and go, these are areas I really need to focus on or improve on that ultimately need to make it into my plan. This slide is just a high-level overview of what an always-on campaign is. And I would submit to you, if you're a B2B company and you're spending money on media, you need to be thinking about, at least, am I going to do this or not do this? But it's important that you think about an always-on campaign versus a lead gen campaign. They're really not diametrically opposed, but most B2B companies are still thinking very direct response. Like, oh my gosh, when I spend money on LinkedIn, I'm spending money to generate, opt-ins for an ebook, or I'm spending money on LinkedIn to get leads. An always on approach is different. It says, yeah, I want to generate leads and I want to generate opportunity through all of my paid tactics, but I am going to spend some money top of the funnel without any expectation of generating leads, but with the goal of creating awareness and building retargeting pools so that I can continue to drive a message down funnel. And that you're not running it from a tactical perspective, like, hey, I'm going to run this campaign. It's got a start and stop date, but that I'm always on. I'm always in market with top of the funnel messages. And then once I've got those people engaged at top of the funnel, I'm retargeting them with a bottom of the funnel message, and I'm pulsing in opportunities for them to raise their hand and learn more. I don't have time to go through all of that today. In fact, I need to check oh my gosh, got 5 minutes left. When I'm sharing my screen, I don't see my clock. So I can ramble. You guys can tell already, I know. But anyways, that's what this is all about. Happy to continue the dialogue around always on in the community if you guys want to continue to talk about that. But this is a huge opportunity. If you're not doing this consistently, then I think this is something you might think about implementing in your strategy for next year. Let me land the plane on this slide deck. So when you present to leadership, what I have found works so much better, even though you may build out all those slides that I've walked you through already, what your senior leadership wants to see is a one-page marketing plan. And so at a high level, you just take one page for each objective. You clearly communicate what that objective is. You identify 3 goals. And it doesn't have to be 3, but I've got 3 in this example that are going to get you there. And then what are the tactics that are going to help you achieve that goal? And then I've got a slide here that just shows you what one filled out might look like. So the CEO says we want to win 10 new clients in 2023. Here's 3 things goals that we're going to go after as a marketing department to accomplish that. And then these are the tactics that we're going to bring to the table. And what I found is when you can be this precise and this high level, then the CEO or whoever you're managing up to is going to understand that you've thought through it, and it's given you the freedom and flexibility to go and execute these in a way that makes sense. If you try to be too detailed at that senior level, you get the glassy-eyed senior person, and they don't even fully understand what you're doing. But with something like this, it just makes it a whole lot easier. The last part of this, you'll notice I've got this closing slide, but then I've got our demand gen framework slide here if you want to use that and show it to leadership, and then some slides for you to talk about each of those different pillars. So again, it's kind of a hybrid document. If you want to use it to help you do your own planning, go for it. If you want to grab some of the slides and put them into any of your documentation, you have my permission to do that. And I know, I'm just looking at my clock, we've got 3 minutes left. And so, Andrea, is there maybe one question that I might be able to answer before we wrap, and then we'll wrap?
Yeah, one short question might be, in which KPI bucket do you categorize this event?
Which KPI bucket would I categorize this event? So to me, this is a top of the funnel, middle of the funnel type of an event. We do track. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that. So this is truly a top of the funnel because it's part of our content marketing flywheel. But it's also middle of the funnel because we're continuing to stay top of mind with all of you. And we actually use it, like we slice up this content and it becomes part of our advertising campaign. So it's really a multifaceted part of our strategy. And the reality is, now that I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of KPI, we don't really measure any of the, none of this gets factored into ultimately our KPIs, right? None of the activity on this demand gen jam session ever works into there. So it's really all about just building a community and staying top of mind. So, the fact that you guys registered for this, that doesn't even show up on that report I showed you of all of our KPIs. We don't track that at all. If one person showed up, we'd still have just as much fun as with the 30 or 40 folks that showed up today. So, with that said, I appreciate everybody sticking around. I hope this was useful. Please use those resources as much as you can. If you have any questions about them, reach out to me directly, or better yet, please join our Demand Gen Jammers group on LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going there. And then we'll see you next month for 2023 digital marketing trends. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I appreciate it. Take care.